You wake up in 9th century Norway, and the first thing you feel is cold. Not the kind of cold where you pull up your blanket and go back to sleep. This is the kind of cold that makes your bones ache, that makes every breath hurt your lungs, that kills you slowly if you don't do something about it right now. Welcome to Viking Age Scandinavia. You probably think this is going to be exciting. Raiding, exploring, discovering new lands. But here's what nobody tells you about the Vikings. Most of them never went on a single raid. Most of them spent their entire lives within 20 miles of where they were born, fighting against cold, hunger, and early death. And the cold always won in the end. Your first problem is where you're sleeping. You're in what's called a longhouse, which sounds impressive until you actually see one. It's a rectangular building made of wood, turf, and stone, anywhere from 15 to 30 meters long. There are no separate rooms. Everyone sleeps in the same space. Your entire family. Sometimes other families too. Slaves if your family owns any. Animals during winter. Yes, animals. The sheep, goats, and cattle live inside with you during the coldest months because if they freeze to death outside, your family starves. So you share your living space with livestock, breathing the same air, smelling their waste, listening to them throughout the night. The roof is made of turf and wood. When it rains, which is often in Scandinavia, the roof leaks. When it snows, which is even more often, the weight of the snow makes the roof sag and drip melted water onto whoever is sleeping beneath that section. There are no windows, or maybe one very small opening that can be covered with animal skin. Why no windows? Because glass doesn't exist for common people, and any opening in the wall means cold air coming in. You need every bit of warmth you can trap inside this building. The floor is packed dirt. Sometimes there are wooden planks if your family is wealthy enough, but probably not. You're sleeping on the dirt floor covered with straw, furs, and whatever fabric your family has managed to weave during the summer months. These bedding materials are rarely washed because water is precious and cleaning large items is nearly impossible during winter. So everything smells like sweat, animals, smoke, and mildew. You get used to it. You have to. There's a fire pit in the center of the longhouse. This is your only heat source, your only light source, and your only cooking area. The fire must never go out during winter. If it does, relighting it is difficult and time-consuming, and in those hours without fire, people can freeze to death. So someone in your family, probably you, has to wake up multiple times during the night to add wood to the fire. You don't get a full night's sleep from October to April. Nobody does. The smoke from the fire has nowhere to go except up through a hole in the roof. Except the smoke doesn't just go straight up. It fills the entire longhouse first, making your eyes water, making you cough, coating everything with a layer of soot. Your lungs are constantly irritated. Respiratory infections are common and often fatal. Children and elderly people die from smoke inhalation and related illnesses every winter. But you can't not have the fire. Without it, you freeze. With it, you slowly poison yourself. These are your options. Let's talk about the temperature. Modern Norway gets cold, but you have heated homes, insulated walls, warm clothing, hot showers. You have none of these things. The temperature inside your longhouse during a Norwegian winter night is maybe 5 to 10 degrees Celsius if you're lucky. That's 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. You're trying to sleep in what is essentially a refrigerator. Your breath creates fog in the air. The moisture from everyone's breathing freezes on the walls. In the morning, there's frost inside the house. You're wearing every piece of clothing you own to bed. A wool undergarment, a wool tunic, wool trousers, wool socks, a wool cloak, maybe a fur if your family could afford to hunt or trade for one. The problem is wool only insulates when it's dry, and in the damp Scandinavian climate, wool is never completely dry, so your clothing is constantly slightly wet, which means you're constantly slightly cold, which means your body is constantly burning calories trying to stay warm, which means you're always hungry, which creates a whole other set of problems we'll discuss later. You're huddled under animal furs with your family members, sharing body heat. This is not comfortable. This is not cozy. Everyone is positioned to maximize warmth, which means you're pressed against other people's bodies whether you want to be or not. Personal space doesn't exist. Privacy doesn't exist. If you need to relieve yourself during the night, you have to get up, walk across the cold floor and go outside into the freezing darkness, or use a bucket kept near the entrance. Either option is miserable. Speaking of going outside, let's discuss what that actually means in Viking Age winter. You step out of the longhouse into complete darkness. There are no street lights, no house lights from neighbors, no light pollution, just pure absolute darkness. The only light comes from stars if the sky is clear, which it usually isn't. You can't see your hand in front of your face. You're navigating by memory and feel, hoping you don't step into a hole, trip over something, or walk into the forest by accident. The wind is the worst part. Scandinavian winter wind doesn't just blow, it cuts. It finds every gap in your clothing and pushes cold air directly onto your skin. Your face, the only part of you that's exposed, goes numb within minutes. Your nose runs constantly. The moisture freezes on your face. Your beard, if you're a man, collects ice. Your eyelashes freeze together. You have to blink hard to keep your eyes open. The snow is waist deep in some areas. There are no plowed paths, no cleared roads. Every trip outside is exhausting physical labor. You're pushing through snow, sinking with every step, your legs burning with effort, your lungs burning from the cold air, and you're just trying to get to the storage building 20 meters away to get more firewood. This simple task that would take 30 seconds in summer takes 10 minutes in winter and leaves you exhausted. Frostbite is a constant risk. Your fingers and toes are especially vulnerable. When you come back inside from the cold, the warming process is agonizing. Your frozen extremities thaw out and the pain is intense. It feels like thousands of needles stabbing into your skin. You can't touch anything. You can't use your hands. You just have to wait for the pain to subside, which takes an hour or more. And you'll have to do this again tomorrow and the day after that and every day until spring. Some people don't come back inside. Every winter, someone in the community goes outside and doesn't return. Maybe they got disoriented in the dark. Maybe they fell and couldn't get up. Maybe they just sat down to rest and never stood up again. Hypothermia is a gentle death, they say. Once you get cold enough, you stop feeling it. You just feel sleepy. You lie down in the snow and you don't wake up. It happens to elderly people most often, but it happens to young, healthy people too. One mistake, one moment of bad judgment, and you're dead. Inside the longhouse, you're lying awake because it's too cold to sleep comfortably. Your body is shivering, an automatic response to generate heat. But shivering burns calories and you don't have calories to spare. Your last meal was hours ago, and it wasn't enough to fill you up because it's never enough during winter. Your stomach is cramping with hunger. Your body is shaking with cold and you're trying to sleep because there's nothing else to do. You can't read. You can't see anything in the dark. You just lie there waiting for morning, listening to your family members coughing, snoring, shifting positions, and the animals shuffling around on their side of the longhouse. The animals are actually warmer than you are. Their body heat contributes to warming the longhouse, which is why they're inside in the first place. But they also contribute to the smell, the noise, and the disease. Livestock carry parasites, fleas, lice, mites, worms. Living in close proximity to animals means you're constantly exposed to these parasites. You have fleas biting you right now as you try to sleep. You've had them your entire life. Everyone has them. There's no way to get rid of them completely. You just accept that you'll always be itchy, always be scratching, always have small infected wounds from scratching too hard. Your skin is dry and cracked from the cold. Your lips are split and bleeding. Your hands are rough and calloused, covered in small cuts that never fully heal because you're constantly using your hands for manual labor in cold conditions. Some of these cuts are infected. You don't have antibiotics. You don't have antiseptic. You have honey, if you're lucky, which has some antibacterial properties. But mostly you just hope your body fights off the infection on its own. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Let's talk about what happens when it doesn't. A small cut on your finger becomes red and swollen. The infection spreads up your hand, then your arm. Your lymph nodes swell. You develop a fever. Your family gives you willow bark tea, which helps with pain and fever because it contains salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin. But it doesn't cure infection. Either your immune system wins or the infection wins. If the infection wins, you die. It's that simple. People die from infected cuts all the time in the Viking Age. A small injury that modern medicine would cure with a week of antibiotics becomes a death sentence, but let's say you survive the night, congratulations. Now, you have to survive the day, which presents its own challenges. The first challenge is getting out of bed. Your body is stiff from lying on the hard ground in the cold. Your joints ache. If you're over 30 years old, which is considered old in Viking Age Scandinavia, you probably have arthritis. The cold makes it worse. Every movement hurts. You have to force yourself to stand up, and when you do, your back protests, your knees protest, everything protests. The fire has died down overnight despite your efforts to keep it going. The longhouse is even colder than it was a few hours ago. Your first task of the day is to rebuild the fire, which means going outside to get wood from the storage shed. Remember what we said about going outside? It's still dark. It's still freezing. The wind is still cutting through your clothing. But the fire is essential, so you have no choice. You trudge through the snow to the wood storage. You're hoping there's enough wood left because running out of firewood in the middle of winter is a death sentence. Your family spent the entire summer and autumn cutting, splitting, and storing wood. But winter is long and you never know if you've stored enough. Every log you burn is one less log in your supply. Every day you wonder if you'll run out before spring comes. You load your arms with firewood and carry it back to the longhouse. By the time you get inside, your hands are so cold you can barely feel them. You drop the wood near the fire pit and spend the next few minutes trying to warm your hands enough to actually use them. Then you rebuild the fire, carefully arranging kindling and logs blowing on the embers to encourage flames. It takes time. It takes effort. And this is just the beginning of your day. While you're working on the fire, other family members are waking up. Children are crying because they're cold and hungry. The elderly are coughing, deep rattling coughs that speak of lung infections and accumulated damage from years of breathing smoke. Someone needs to milk the goats. Someone needs to check on the other animals. Someone needs to begin preparing the morning meal, which will be sparse because winter food supplies are dwindling. The morning meal, when it finally happens, is not what you'd call satisfying. You're eating porridge made from barley or oats if your family grew a good crop last summer. The porridge is thin because you have to stretch your grain supplies to last until the next harvest, which is months away. There's no sugar to sweeten it. Maybe a bit of honey if your family kept bees and the bees survived winter. There might be some dried fish or preserved meat. But these are precious resources that have to last, so you only get a small portion. You're sitting on a bench or a log, eating your porridge in the smoky dimness of the longhouse, and you're still cold. The fire is going now, but it takes hours for the longhouse to warm up to anything resembling comfortable. Your porridge is lukewarm at best. You eat it anyway because it's fuel, it's calories, it's what keeps you alive for another day. After the meal, you face the reality of your day ahead. You have work to do. Everyone has work to do. There are no days off in Viking Age Scandinavia. No weekends. No holidays where you get to rest. Every single day requires labor just to maintain the basic necessities of life. You have to feed animals. You have to collect water, which means breaking through ice on the well or the stream. You have to repair things that are constantly breaking down. You have to prepare food. You have to make clothes. You have to maintain the fire. The work never ends. And here's the thing that nobody tells you about Viking life: it's boring. Incredibly, mind-numbingly boring. Yes, some Vikings went on raids and trading expeditions and exploration voyages. But you're not one of those Vikings. You're a farmer. You live on a small farmstead with your family. Your entire world is this farm, these buildings, these fields, this forest. You were born here. You'll die here. You'll probably never see a foreign land. You'll probably never even see the nearest town, which is 3 days' walk away. Your entertainment options are limited. In the evening, if there's enough light from the fire and people aren't too exhausted, someone might tell stories. These oral traditions are important for preserving history and culture. But most nights, people are too tired for stories. Most nights, you just sit in the dark, maybe doing some simple task like repairing a tool or spinning wool, and then you go to sleep because there's nothing else to do. The isolation is profound, especially in winter. Your nearest neighbor lives an hour's walk away through the snow. You haven't seen them in weeks. You have no idea if they're still alive. You won't know until spring when travel becomes possible again. Your entire social world is the dozen or so people who live in or near your longhouse. These same people, day after day, month after month, year after year. No new faces, no new conversations, no variety. The psychological toll of this existence is something we rarely discuss. The constant cold, the constant hunger, the constant work, the isolation, the boredom, the lack of hope for anything better. Depression must have been common, though they didn't have a word for it. What we call seasonal affective disorder would have affected nearly everyone. The long dark winters with only a few hours of weak sunlight per day, the lack of vitamin D, the monotony, the hopelessness. Some people didn't make it through winter for reasons that had nothing to do with physical illness. They just gave up. They lost the will to keep fighting against the cold and the hunger and the darkness. They stopped eating. They stopped getting out of bed. They died quietly while their family watched, unable to help because they didn't understand what was happening. Mental health wasn't a concept. You were either strong enough to survive or you weren't. Children were especially vulnerable, not just physically, but psychologically. Imagine being a child in this environment. No toys, or maybe one or two simple wooden objects, no books. No education beyond learning the practical skills you need to survive. No childhood as we understand it. You start working as soon as you're physically capable. You're expected to contribute to the family's survival. Play is minimal. Joy is rare, and the cold never stops. That's what you need to understand. From October to April you are cold. Not just outside but inside too. When you're working, when you're eating, when you're trying to sleep. The cold is always there. Pressing down on you, sapping your energy, making everything harder. Modern people cannot comprehend what it means to be cold for 6 months straight with no relief. Your body adapts somewhat. You build up more brown fat, the kind that generates heat. Your metabolism adjusts. Your tolerance for cold increases, but you never get comfortable. You never stop shivering. You never stop dreaming about warmth. Spring becomes this mythical concept, this impossible paradise that you're not sure will ever arrive. You're in 9th century Scandinavia, and your wife is pregnant. This should be a moment of joy, of hope, of anticipation for new life. But in Viking Age society, pregnancy is a death sentence waiting to happen. Not might be, as the statistics are brutal and unforgiving. Your wife has roughly a 1 in 10 chance of dying during childbirth or from complications shortly after. Your baby has a 50% chance of not living to see their 5th birthday. These aren't worst-case scenarios. This is normal. This is every family, every pregnancy, every birth. Let's start with the pregnancy itself. Your wife discovered she's pregnant because her monthly bleeding stopped. There are no pregnancy tests, no doctors to confirm it, no ultrasounds to check if the baby is developing properly. She just knows because her body tells her, and now she has to survive the next 9 months hoping everything goes right, knowing that so many things can go wrong. Morning sickness hits her hard. She's vomiting multiple times a day, unable to keep food down, losing weight when she needs to be gaining it. There are no anti-nausea medications, no IV fluids if she becomes dehydrated. She just has to endure it, hoping it passes, praying she doesn't vomit so much that she damages something internally. Some women vomit blood. Some become so dehydrated they die before the baby is even born. Your wife is one of the lucky ones if she survives this phase. The pregnancy progresses, and your wife's body changes in ways that would concern a modern doctor, but are just accepted as normal here. Her feet and ankles swell to twice their normal size. She can barely walk. She's retaining fluid, which could indicate preeclampsia, a condition that kills both mother and baby if not treated. But treatment doesn't exist. You just watch your wife's body swell and hope it doesn't get worse. Sometimes it does. Sometimes women go into convulsions, seizing uncontrollably, and then they die. You've seen it happen to neighbors. It could happen to your wife. She's exhausted all the time, but she can't rest because there's work to do. Pregnancy doesn't exempt you from labor in Viking society. She still has to cook, clean, tend animals, weave cloth, preserve food, fetch water, and do all the other endless tasks required for survival. Being pregnant just means doing all of this while carrying extra weight, while feeling nauseous, while dealing with back pain and swollen feet and constant fatigue. There is no maternity leave. There is no taking it easy. You work until you physically cannot work anymore. Your wife is malnourished, not because you're not trying to feed her, but because there isn't enough food. It's winter. Supplies are low, and what food exists has to be divided among the entire family. She needs extra calories for the baby, but she's not getting them. She's eating the same meager portions as everyone else, maybe a little more if you can spare it. But it's not enough. Her body is cannibalizing itself to build the baby, taking calcium from her teeth and bones, depleting her iron stores, using up her fat reserves that don't exist because she's never had enough food to build up fat reserves. Her teeth are getting worse. Pregnancy affects calcium levels, And without adequate nutrition, her teeth are literally deteriorating. She'll lose some teeth during or after this pregnancy. Most women in Viking society are missing multiple teeth by their 30s, and pregnancy accelerates this decay. Dental infections are common and can spread to the bloodstream, causing sepsis and death. Your wife has a toothache that's been getting worse for weeks. There's nothing you can do about it except hope it doesn't obsess. As the pregnancy advances, your wife develops what we would call gestational diabetes, though no one knows what that is. She's constantly thirsty, urinating frequently, feeling weak and dizzy. Her body isn't processing sugar correctly. The baby is growing too large, which will make birth even more dangerous. But there's no way to diagnose this, no way to manage it. You just notice that your wife seems sick, that she's struggling more than other pregnant women, and you hope she makes it through. The baby is in breech position. This means the baby is positioned feet first or bottom first instead of head first. In modern medicine, this would result in a C-section. In Viking Age Scandinavia, it means your wife will probably die trying to deliver this baby, and the baby will probably die too. There are midwives who know how to try to turn a breech baby, manually manipulating the mother's abdomen to rotate the baby into the correct position. Sometimes it works. Often it doesn't. Sometimes it causes the placenta to detach prematurely, causing massive bleeding that kills mother and baby within minutes. Your wife goes into labor 3 weeks early. Premature birth is common in malnourished mothers. The baby might not be developed enough to survive outside the womb. The baby's lungs might not be ready. But labor has started, and there's no stopping it. Contractions begin, and now your wife faces hours or days of agony with no guarantee of survival for her or the baby. The midwife arrives. She's an older woman who has attended many births and seen many deaths. Her presence is reassuring, but she's not a doctor. She has no medical training in the modern sense. She has experience and traditional knowledge passed down through generations. Some of it helpful, some of it useless, some of it actively harmful. She feels your wife's abdomen and confirms what you feared. The baby is breech. She'll try to turn it, but she's not optimistic. The midwife attempts to manually rotate the baby. This is excruciating for your wife. She's screaming, begging for it to stop, but the midwife continues because this is the only chance. Your wife is sweating, crying, in more pain than you've ever seen anyone endure. After 20 minutes of manipulation, the midwife stops. The baby hasn't turned. It's still breech. Your wife will have to deliver this baby feet first, which means she'll probably die. Labor continues for 18 hours. Your wife is in the longhouse lying on a birthing stool or on the floor covered with straw and furs. Other women from the community are there to help, but mostly they're just watching, praying, knowing that they might be in this same position soon. Your wife is exhausted beyond measure. She hasn't slept. She's been in active labor for almost a full day. Her body is trying to push out a baby that's positioned wrong, and it's tearing her apart. The bleeding starts. This is bad. This is very bad. Blood is pooling beneath your wife, soaking through the straw. More blood than seems possible for one person to lose. The midwife is trying to stop it, packing cloth between your wife's legs, but it keeps coming. Your wife is becoming pale, her lips turning blue, her breathing shallow. She's going into shock from blood loss. In a modern hospital, she'd receive blood transfusions and emergency surgery. Here, she just bleeds. The baby's foot emerges. This is progress, but it's agonizing progress. The baby is stuck, partially born but unable to be delivered completely. Your wife is pushing with every contraction, but the baby won't come out. Hours pass like this. The baby might already be dead, strangled by the umbilical cord or deprived of oxygen for too long. Your wife might die before the baby is fully born. Everyone in the room knows this is going badly, but there's nothing more they can do. Finally, after 23 hours of labor, the baby is born. But the baby isn't breathing. The midwife holds the infant upside down, slapping its back, trying to stimulate breathing. Nothing. She rubs the baby's chest vigorously. Still nothing. She puts her mouth over the baby's nose and mouth, breathing air into the tiny lungs. This sometimes works. This time it doesn't. Your baby is dead. Your baby was born dead, or died within seconds of birth, and there was nothing anyone could do to save it. Your wife is still bleeding. The placenta needs to be delivered, but it's not coming out. The midwife reaches inside your wife's body, trying to manually extract the placenta. and your wife screams in agony. This is called a retained placenta, and it's one of the leading causes of maternal death. If the placenta doesn't come out, your wife will develop an infection and die within days. The midwife pulls and finally the placenta tears free, along with more blood, so much blood. Your wife survives the birth, but barely. She's lost an enormous amount of blood. She's weak, barely conscious, unable to move. The other women clean her, change the blood-soaked bedding, try to make her comfortable. But she has no baby. She endured 23 hours of agony and nearly died, and she has nothing to show for it except trauma and grief. This is her third pregnancy. The first baby lived for 2 days before dying of unknown causes. The second baby was stillborn. This is the third dead baby. She's 24 years old. Let's say your wife survives and the baby survives. You now have a living infant in Viking Age Scandinavia, which presents a completely new set of challenges. This baby needs to eat every 2 to 3 hours. Your wife is breastfeeding because there are no alternatives. No formula. No bottles. If your wife can't breastfeed for any reason, if she doesn't produce enough milk or if she dies during childbirth, you need to find a wet nurse. Another woman who is currently breastfeeding and willing to feed your baby too. If you can't find a wet nurse, your baby starves to death. It's that simple. Breastfeeding is painful. Your wife's nipples crack and bleed. Each feeding is agony for the first few weeks. Sometimes the cracks become infected, leading to mastitis, a painful infection of the breast tissue that causes fever, swelling, and severe pain. Mastitis can progress to a breast abscess, which can be life-threatening if not drained. There are no antibiotics. Your wife just has to endure the pain and hope the infection resolves on its own. The baby is crying constantly. All babies cry, but you're in a longhouse with no soundproofing, no separate rooms, no way to escape the noise. The baby cries because it's hungry. It cries because it's cold. It cries because it's uncomfortable. It cries for reasons you can't determine, and you can't do anything about the crying except try to feed it, try to keep it warm, and hope it eventually stops. You're not sleeping. Your wife isn't sleeping. No one in the longhouse is sleeping because the baby is crying every few hours all night long for months. Sudden infant death syndrome is common, though no one knows what causes it. You put your baby down to sleep, and hours later you discover the baby has stopped breathing. No warning, no explanation. The baby was healthy and now the baby is dead. This happens frequently enough that every parent lives in fear of it. You check on your baby constantly, making sure it's still breathing because you know that death can come without warning. The baby develops diarrhea. In a modern context, infant diarrhea is concerning, but manageable. In Viking Age Scandinavia, it's often fatal. The baby becomes dehydrated quickly. Within a day or two, the baby is lethargic, not feeding well, its skin losing elasticity. You try to give the baby water, but it won't drink or can't keep it down. The baby's eyes sink into its skull. Its fontanelle, the soft spot on top of its head, becomes sunken. These are signs of severe dehydration. Without intravenous fluids, which don't exist, the baby will die. And it does. Diarrhea kills countless infants every year. Your baby develops a fever. The baby is hot to the touch, flushed, breathing rapidly, clearly sick. You don't know what's causing the fever. It could be a simple viral infection that will pass. It could be bacterial meningitis that will kill the baby within hours. There's no way to tell. No thermometer to measure the fever. No antibiotics to treat infection. You just hold your sick baby and pray. Sometimes the fever breaks and the baby recovers. Sometimes the baby has a seizure from the high fever and dies. Sometimes the baby simply stops breathing during the night. Respiratory infections are everywhere. Your baby catches a cold from someone in the longhouse because in close quarters with no concept of germ theory, infections spread rapidly. The cold progresses to pneumonia. The baby's breathing becomes labored, wheezing with each breath. The baby's lips turn blue from lack of oxygen. You hold your baby upright, hoping it helps with breathing. The midwife prepares herbal remedies that might help with congestion, but they're not antibiotics. They don't kill bacteria. They just make breathing slightly easier. Your baby fights the infection for days, getting weaker, breathing harder, until finally the baby stops breathing altogether. Let's say your baby survives infancy. This is already remarkable. Your child is now 2 years old, walking, talking, becoming a little person. But survival to age 2 doesn't mean survival to age 5. The dangers don't stop. They just change form. Your 2-year-old is learning to walk around the farmstead, exploring the world with no concept of danger. The longhouse has an open fire pit in the center. There are no safety gates, no barriers. Your child toddles too close to the fire and falls forward. Their hands go into the hot coals. The screaming is immediate and terrible. You pull your child away from the fire, but the damage is done. Their hands are burned, the skin already blistering and peeling away. Burns in Viking Age Scandinavia often lead to infection and death. You have no burn cream, no antibiotics, no sterile bandages. You might have honey, which has some antibacterial properties. You might have certain herbs that are traditionally used for burns, but mostly you just wrap the burned hands in whatever clean cloth you have and hope the wounds don't become infected. They probably will become infected. The child will develop a fever. The burns will ooze pus. The infection will spread through the bloodstream. Your child will die in agony, crying for relief that doesn't exist. Or your child survives the burns but loses the use of their hands. The scarring is so severe that their fingers curl inward, permanently contracted. They can't grip things properly. They can't do manual labor effectively. In a society where everyone must contribute physical labor to survive, a disability like this is devastating. Your child will struggle their entire life, always at a disadvantage, always the weakest member of the community. Your 3-year-old wanders away from the longhouse one afternoon. You're working, distracted for just a few minutes, and when you look up, your child is gone. You search frantically. You call their name. Other family members join the search. You find your child an hour later at the edge of the forest, cold and crying but alive. You're lucky this time. Other times, children wander off and are never found. They get lost in the forest and die of exposure. They fall into a stream and drown. They encounter a wild animal. Young children disappearing and dying is common enough that every parent lives with constant anxiety about keeping their children within sight. Your 4-year-old develops what we would recognize as measles. A rash appears, starting on the face and spreading to the body. Fever spikes dangerously high. The child is miserable, crying, unable to eat or drink. Measles in Viking Age Scandinavia has a high mortality rate, especially in malnourished children. Your child's immune system is already weakened from inadequate nutrition. The measles virus attacks the body ruthlessly. Your child develops complications: ear infections, pneumonia, encephalitis. The fever causes seizures. Your child's body convulses violently while you hold them down, trying to keep them from hurting themselves. The seizures damage the brain. Even if your child survives, they might never be the same. Cognitive delays, behavioral changes, permanent neurological damage. Parasitic infections are universal among children. Every child has intestinal worms. You can sometimes see them in your child's feces. Long white worms writhing in the waste. These parasites steal nutrition from your already malnourished child. Your child's belly is distended, swollen with worms and fluid. Their arms and legs are stick-thin. They're constantly tired, constantly hungry no matter how much they eat, because the parasites are consuming the nutrients before your child's body can absorb them. There are traditional remedies for worms, certain herbs that might kill or expel some parasites, but you never get rid of them completely. Your child will have worms their entire life along with everyone else. It's just another burden the body must carry, another drain on limited resources, another reason why children fail to thrive. Dental problems start early. Your 5-year-old has cavities in their baby teeth. 1 tooth abscesses, the infection creating a painful swelling in the gum. Your child is crying constantly, unable to eat, touching their face where it hurts. The infection can spread to the jawbone, to the bloodstream, to the brain. Children die from dental infections regularly. You try to help by having someone pull the infected tooth, but this is done without anesthesia, without proper tools. Someone holds your screaming child while another person uses pliers to wrench the tooth out of the infected gum. It's traumatic. It's agonizing, and it might not even solve the problem if the infection has already spread. Accidents are constant with young children. Your child falls from a height and breaks an arm. The bone is sticking out through the skin, a compound fracture. This is extremely serious. You try to set the bone, pushing it back into place while your child screams. You splint the arm with sticks and cloth strips, but without proper medical care, without x-rays to ensure correct alignment, without antibiotics to prevent infection, the outcome is grim. The bone might heal crooked, leaving your child with a deformed arm and limited mobility. Or infection might set in around the fracture site, and your child might die from sepsis. Or the bone might heal, but your child develops chronic pain that lasts their entire life. Your child's nutrition is inadequate by any standard. Growing bodies need protein, calcium, vitamins, minerals. Your child is getting some of these nutrients, but not nearly enough. They're shorter than they should be. Their bones are weak, breaking easily from minor falls. They bruise extensively from small impacts because they're deficient in vitamins necessary for blood clotting. Their teeth are malformed and weak because they didn't get enough calcium during tooth development. Their immune system is compromised because chronic malnutrition weakens the body's ability to fight infection. Vitamin D deficiency is universal in Scandinavian winter. Months without sunlight means no vitamin D production in the skin. Children develop rickets, a disease where bones fail to develop properly. Your child's legs bow outward under the weight of their body. Their wrists and ankles are swollen. Their rib cage is deformed. This is painful and permanent. Your child will never have normal bone structure. They'll struggle with mobility their entire life. In severe cases, rickets affects the pelvis, which means your daughter, if she survives to adulthood and becomes pregnant, will have difficulty giving birth because her pelvis is too narrow or malformed. Your child works from the moment they're physically capable. There's no childhood as modern people understand it. No school, no playdates, no toys except perhaps one or two simple carved objects. Your 5-year-old is expected to help with chores appropriate to their size and strength. Feeding chickens, collecting eggs, carrying small amounts of firewood, stirring the cooking pot, simple weaving tasks. As they get older, the work gets harder. By age 7, children are doing significant labor. By age 10, they're doing nearly adult-level work. This constant labor damages growing bodies. Your child's spine develops abnormally from carrying heavy loads before their skeletal system is fully developed. Their joints wear down prematurely. They develop arthritis as teenagers. Their hands become calloused and scarred from repetitive work and small injuries. Physical deformities from childhood labor are visible in the skeletal remains archaeologists find, vertebrae compressed from carrying weight, joints showing early signs of degenerative disease, bones that healed poorly from fractures sustained during work accidents. Education doesn't exist for common children. Your child will never learn to read or write. These skills are limited to the very wealthy or to religious functionaries. Your child will never know literature, poetry, written history, mathematics beyond basic counting. Their world is entirely oral and experiential. They learn by watching adults and copying their actions. They learn through trial and error. They learn through painful consequences when they make mistakes. Your child's entire existence is bounded by survival. They don't dream of becoming something when they grow up, because there is no becoming something. They will be a farmer like you or a farmer's wife, doing the same work you do, living in the same conditions you live in, probably on this same farmstead or one very close by. There is no social mobility, no opportunity for advancement, no hope for a better life. This is it. This is all there is and all there ever will be. The psychological impact of this existence on children is profound but rarely discussed. Imagine being a child and watching your siblings die. This isn't unusual. This is normal. Most families lose multiple children. You might be one of 7 children born, but only 3 survive to adulthood. You watch your baby brother die from diarrhea. You watch your older sister die from infection after a cut on her foot. You watch your younger sister die from fever. Death is your constant companion from your earliest memories. Children in Viking society grow up with no illusion that the world is safe or fair, or that adults can protect them. They see too much death, too much suffering, too much random tragedy to believe in security. They learn early that life is brutal, short, and filled with pain. This creates a particular kind of hardness, a pragmatic acceptance of suffering that modern people would find disturbing. You're waking up in 9th century Scandinavia, and you need to understand something fundamental about Viking society that popular culture conveniently ignores. This civilization that's been romanticized in countless movies, TV shows, and video games was built on slavery, not metaphorical slavery, not wage slavery, actual, brutal, dehumanizing chattel slavery where human beings were property that could be bought, sold, beaten, raped, and killed with no legal consequences whatsoever. The Vikings called slaves thralls. The word itself comes from Old Norse, and it means exactly what it sounds like. A person in bondage, a person who is owned. Conservative estimates suggest that slaves made up 10 to 20% of the Scandinavian population during the Viking Age. Other historians argue it was higher, possibly 30% or more in certain regions. Either way, we're talking about tens of thousands of people living in permanent hereditary bondage with no hope of freedom. Let's be clear about how you become a thrall. You're not a Scandinavian. You're from somewhere else. Maybe you're from the British Isles, living in a small village on the coast of England or Ireland. Maybe you're from what's now France or Eastern Europe or even the Mediterranean. You're living your normal life when Viking raiders arrive. They come in longships, fast and deadly, hitting your village before anyone can organize a defense. The men who fight back are killed immediately. The men who surrender might be killed anyway, or they might be taken as slaves. The women and children are almost always taken. You're a 20-year-old woman from a coastal English village. The Vikings attack at dawn. Your father tries to fight and is cut down with an axe to the skull. Your mother is killed when she tries to protect your younger siblings. Your brother, who is 15, is killed because he's old enough to be a threat, but not valuable enough as a slave. But you're perfect for slavery. You're young, healthy female. You can work. You can breed. You're valuable property. The Vikings bind your hands behind your back with rough rope that cuts into your wrists. They put a rope around your neck like you're an animal. You and the other survivors from your village, maybe 20 people total, are herded down to the beach where the longships are waiting. If you resist, you're beaten. If you try to run, you're killed. You learn very quickly that your only option is compliance. The journey back to Scandinavia takes weeks. You're cramped in the longship with dozens of other people, many of them also captured slaves. There's barely room to sit. You can't lie down. You can't move around. You're fed once a day, usually some kind of porridge or stale bread, just enough to keep you alive. You're given water irregularly. Several people die during the voyage from dehydration, starvation, or simply giving up. Their bodies are thrown overboard without ceremony. When you finally arrive in Norway, you're sold at a slave market. Yes, Viking society had slave markets where human beings were bought and sold like livestock. You stand on a platform while potential buyers examine you. They look at your teeth to assess your health. They feel your arms and legs to evaluate your strength. They discuss your value in front of you as if you're not even human. A farmer buys you for the equivalent of 8 silver coins, about the same price as a good milk cow. Your new owner takes you to his farmstead. This is your life now. Your property. You have no legal rights whatsoever. Your owner can do anything to you, and there's no authority you can appeal to. Viking law is very clear. Slaves are property, not people. If someone kills you, the only crime is destruction of property, and they owe your owner compensation not for your life, but for the economic loss of a slave. You sleep in the worst part of the longhouse, the area closest to the animals. There's no bed. You sleep on straw on the dirt floor. You're given one blanket. Thin and inadequate for the Scandinavian winter, you're cold every night. Your owner's family has furs and multiple layers of clothing. You have one simple tunic and nothing else. When it's freezing, you huddle with the animals for warmth because their body heat is the only thing keeping you from dying of hypothermia. Your day starts before everyone else's. You wake up in the dark and immediately begin work. You fetch water from the well or stream, carrying heavy buckets back to the longhouse. This is exhausting labor, especially in winter when you have to break through ice. You light the fire and prepare the morning meal for the family. You milk the goats and cows. You feed the chickens. You clean out animal waste from the longhouse. All of this before the sun rises. Once the family wakes up, your work continues. You serve them their meal. You don't eat with them. You eat after they're finished, and you eat their leftovers. Sometimes there are no leftovers and you just don't eat. You're always hungry. The family gets adequate nutrition, or as adequate as possible in Viking Age Scandinavia. You get whatever remains, which is never enough. You work all day, every day. There are no days off. There are no breaks. If you slow down, you're beaten. Your owner has a stick that he uses to hit slaves who aren't working fast enough. You've been hit multiple times. Hard enough to leave bruises, hard enough to crack bones. You learn to work through pain, through exhaustion, through illness, because stopping means more beatings. The labor is brutal. You carry heavy loads that strain your back and shoulders. You spend hours bent over doing repetitive tasks that destroy your joints. You work in all weather conditions, freezing cold, pouring rain, snowstorms. You have no proper clothing for cold weather. Your hands develop severe frostbite. Several of your fingers have permanent nerve damage. They're numb all the time and you can't grip things properly anymore. Your owner doesn't care. You can still work with damaged hands. Sexual abuse is constant and expected. You're a female slave, which means your body belongs to your owner. He rapes you whenever he wants. There's no concept of consent. You're property. He can use you however he chooses. His sons also rape you. Sometimes guests rape you. You have no ability to resist. If you try to fight back, you're beaten severely. You learn to dissociate, to mentally separate yourself from what's happening to your body because it's the only way to survive. You become pregnant from these rapes. This doesn't change your work expectations. You still work the same grueling hours doing the same heavy labor. Your owner doesn't care that you're pregnant with his child. The baby is just future property, another slave to add to his household. You give birth alone in the animal section of the longhouse. There's no midwife for slaves. No help, no comfort. You deliver the baby by yourself, biting down on a piece of wood to keep from screaming, and then you're expected to return to work the next day. Your baby is taken from you when it's old enough to be weaned. You don't get to raise your own child. Your child is raised as a slave just like you. You watch your child grow up as property, knowing they'll face the same abuse you face, the same hopelessness, the same brutal existence. This is hereditary slavery. Your child is born a slave. Your child's children will be born slaves. This status is permanent across generations unless an owner chooses to free someone, which is extremely rare. Other slaves on the farmstead are not friends or allies. You're all competing for the minimal resources available. The small amount of food, the slightly warmer sleeping spot, the slightly less terrible work assignment. You can't trust anyone because everyone is desperate. Some slaves become informants, telling the owner about others breaking rules in exchange for tiny privileges. This creates an atmosphere of paranoia and isolation. One of the male slaves tries to escape. He runs away during the night, hoping to reach the coast and somehow find passage back to his homeland. He's caught within 2 days. The punishment is public and meant to terrorize the rest of you. Your owner gathers all the slaves to watch. He beats the escaped slave with a wooden club, methodically breaking bones. The man is screaming, begging for mercy. There is no mercy. The beating continues until the man is barely conscious. Then your owner chains him outside in the cold as a warning to everyone else. The man dies from his injuries and exposure over the next 3 days. You think about escape constantly, but you know it's impossible. Where would you go? You're in a foreign land. You don't speak the language fluently. You don't know the geography. You have no money, no resources, no allies. Even if you manage to escape the farmstead, you'd be immediately recognizable as a slave. You have the slave haircut, the crude clothing, the bearing of someone who has been broken by servitude. Anyone who saw you would either return you to your owner for a reward or just kill you and take whatever you have. The isolation is psychologically devastating. You'll never see your homeland again. You'll never see any surviving family members. You have no hope of rescue. No one is coming to save you. This is your life now forever until you die. And you'll probably die soon because slave life expectancy is drastically shorter than free people. The combination of malnutrition, overwork, abuse, and lack of medical care means most slaves don't survive more than 10 or 15 years after capture. You develop infections that never fully heal. The constant work in unsanitary conditions means you always have open wounds, cuts, and sores. These become infected because there's no way to keep them clean. You have a large abscess on your leg that's been there for months, oozing pus, causing constant pain. Your owner won't provide any treatment because treatment costs money, and you're not valuable enough to warrant that expense. The infection is slowly spreading. It will probably kill you eventually. Your teeth are falling out from malnutrition and lack of care. You've lost 4 teeth in the past 2 years. Eating is painful. Everything you eat has to be soft because you can't chew properly. This makes your malnutrition worse, because you can't eat many types of food that would provide better nutrition. Your gums are infected and bleeding. The pain is constant. You've witnessed other slaves die and seen how little their deaths matter. An elderly slave who could no longer work was simply left outside during winter. No food, no shelter. He froze to death over several days. His body was dragged away and buried in an unmarked grave with no ceremony. A young slave girl died from infection after a beating. Her body was disposed of the same way. Slave lives have no value. When you die, you'll be treated exactly the same. No one will mourn you. No one will remember you. The psychological torture of slavery is worse than the physical torture in many ways. You're constantly reminded that you're not human. You're referred to as it or the thrall, never by name. Your owner doesn't care what your name is. You're just property, like a tool or an animal. This dehumanization is deliberate and constant. It's designed to break your spirit, to make you accept your status, to prevent you from even thinking about resistance. You're not allowed to make eye contact with free people. Looking a free person in the eye is considered insolent and will get you beaten. You must keep your head down, your eyes on the ground, always deferential, always submissive. This posture becomes automatic after months of conditioning. Even when you're alone, you find yourself looking at the ground, hunched over, making yourself small and non-threatening. The religious aspects of slavery are particularly cruel. The family you serve worships the Norse gods, and they tell you that your enslavement is divinely ordained. They believe that some people are meant to be free and others are meant to be slaves. This is the natural order of things blessed by the gods. They tell you that if you serve well in this life, maybe in the next life you'll be born free. This is meant to encourage compliance, to make you accept your suffering as somehow meaningful or necessary. You're not allowed to participate in religious ceremonies or community gatherings. Slaves exist outside the social structure. You're invisible except when you're working. The community festivals, the religious celebrations, the social gatherings that give meaning to free people's lives are all closed to you. You work during these times serving the free people who are celebrating invisible labor that makes their joy possible. Your owner's wife treats you with particular cruelty. She resents your presence because she knows her husband rapes you, but she can't direct her anger at him. So she directs it at you. She makes your work assignments as miserable as possible. She withholds food as punishment for imagined infractions. She insults you constantly, reminding you that you're worthless, that you're less than human, that you deserve your suffering. She hits you with whatever is convenient. Wooden spoons, sticks, her fists. The bruises never fully heal before new ones appear. The children of the family grow up learning to treat slaves as objects. The youngest child, a 5-year-old boy, hits you for entertainment. He learned this behavior from watching adults. When you don't react, don't cry out, don't show pain, he hits harder, trying to get a response. If you do react, he tells his parents you were threatening him, and you get beaten more severely. There's no right response. Either way, you suffer. You develop chronic health problems that will never be treated. The constant heavy labor has destroyed your back. You have severe chronic pain that makes every movement agony, but you can't stop moving. You can't rest. You must continue working at the same pace despite the pain. You've learned to work while crying, tears running down your face silently while your body screams in protest. Your hands are permanently damaged from years of rough labor in extreme cold. The frostbite you suffered in previous winters left permanent damage. Several fingers are partially amputated, the tips having literally frozen and died and fallen off. The remaining fingers don't work properly. You drop things frequently. Your owner beats you for being clumsy, but there's nothing you can do. Your hands are ruined. You have chronic respiratory problems from years of breathing smoke in the poorly ventilated longhouse, and from working in extreme cold. You cough constantly, a deep, painful cough that brings up blood sometimes. Your lungs are damaged. Each breath is difficult, but you keep working because you have no choice. The food you're given is not just inadequate in quantity, but also in quality. You eat the worst parts of everything. When the family butchers an animal, they eat the good meat. You get the organs, the gristle, the parts they don't want. When they make bread, they eat the fresh bread. You get whatever is stale or moldy. Your diet lacks essential nutrients. You have scurvy from vitamin C deficiency. Your gums bleed. Your teeth are loose. Old wounds don't heal. You bruise from the slightest touch. You're developing rickets even as an adult, a disease usually associated with children. The complete lack of sunlight in winter combined with inadequate nutrition means your bones are deteriorating. You're in constant pain. Your bones feel like they're crumbling inside your body. Walking becomes more difficult every day. Your spine is curving abnormally. Your legs are bowing outward. You're physically deforming from the conditions of your slavery. Sleep deprivation is used as a control mechanism. You're woken up earlier than everyone else and allowed to sleep after everyone else. You never get enough sleep. The chronic exhaustion makes you compliant, makes you less likely to resist, makes you easier to control. You're always tired, always struggling to stay awake and alert. The exhaustion is so profound that you sometimes fall asleep while standing, while working, and then wake up with a start when you hit the ground. You've forgotten what it feels like to be warm. You've forgotten what it feels like to be full. You've forgotten what it feels like to be rested. You've forgotten what it feels like to make your own choices. You've forgotten what freedom feels like. These things are so far in your past that they seem like dreams, like things that happened to a different person, in a different life. You see new slaves arrive, fresh captures from recent raids. You see the terror in their eyes, the disbelief, the desperate hope that this is temporary, that someone will rescue them, that this can't really be their life now. You remember feeling that way. You remember that hope. You remember when you still believed escape was possible. Now you know better. That hope dies quickly. You watch it die in the new slaves over weeks or months. You watch them transform from defiant to broken, just like you did. One of the new slaves refuses to accept his status. He fights back when ordered to work. He curses his owner. He remains defiant despite beatings. You admire his courage, but you know it's futile. After a week of resistance, your owner decides to make an example of him. The slave is taken outside. Your owner uses a knife to cut off the slave's nose and ears. This is a traditional punishment for defiant slaves. The mutilation marks the slave permanently as rebellious, warns other potential owners about his character if he's ever sold, and serves as a warning to other slaves. The man survives the mutilation but is broken by it. Within a month, he's as compliant as everyone else. You've seen slaves killed for entertainment. During a feast, when your owner and his friends are drunk, they decide to test a new sword. They bring out a male slave and order him to kneel. The slave begs for his life. The owner's friend swings the sword, testing whether it can decapitate a man in one blow. It does. Everyone cheers. They test 2 more swords on 2 more slaves. This is considered amusing. This is what your life is worth to these people. Entertainment value during a drunken feast. The legal system reinforces your non-personhood. You witnessed a dispute between your owner and a neighbor. The neighbor's dog killed one of your owner's chickens. There was a legal proceeding to determine compensation. The entire community gathered to hear arguments and render judgment. The neighbor had to pay your owner compensation for the chicken. Later that week, your owner killed a slave belonging to that neighbor out of spite. There was no legal proceeding. No one cared. A slave's life is worth less than a chicken in Viking Age legal codes. You're not allowed to testify in legal matters. Even if you witness a crime, even if you have information that could resolve a dispute, your testimony is not admissible. Your property doesn't testify. This means crimes committed against you, crimes you witness, abuses you suffer, none of it matters in any legal sense. There is no justice for slaves. There is no protection under law. Your owner can kill you at any time for any reason or no reason at all. If he wakes up angry and decides to kill a slave, he can kill you. If you spill something, if you work too slowly, if he just doesn't like your face, he can kill you. The only check on this power is economic. You represent an investment. But you're not a large investment. 8 silver coins. That's your entire value. If killing you would bring him more satisfaction than 8 silver coins, you're dead. You're in 9th century Scandinavia, and you need to understand that violence here isn't an aberration. It's not something that happens occasionally during wars or raids. Violence is the fundamental organizing principle of this society. It's how disputes are resolved. It's how honor is maintained. It's how social status is determined. It's woven into every aspect of daily life so thoroughly that you can't escape it. And as a common person with no powerful family connections, you're at the bottom of this violent hierarchy, which means you're always vulnerable, always at risk, always one insult away from death. Let's start with the legal system, because you need to understand how fundamentally different it is from anything you know. In modern societies, the state has a monopoly on violence. If someone wrongs you, you go to the police, to the courts, to official authorities who will investigate and punish the wrongdoer. In Viking Age Scandinavia, there is no police force. There is no state authority that protects you. Justice is private. If someone wrongs you, It's your responsibility and your family's responsibility to seek compensation or revenge. This system is called blood feud and it dominates Viking society. Someone kills your brother. In a modern context, you would report this to the police. They would investigate. They would arrest the killer. There would be a trial. The killer would go to prison. In Viking Age Scandinavia, none of that exists. Your brother is dead and now you have two options. Option 1. You demand vergild, which is monetary compensation for the death. The killer's family might agree to pay this, and if they do, the matter is settled. Option 2. If they refuse to pay or if you decide that money isn't sufficient, you kill the killer or someone in his family. This is not murder in the legal sense. This is justice. This is how the system works. But here's where it gets complicated. When you kill the killer to avenge your brother, you've now created a new wrong that demands compensation or revenge. The killer's family now has the same options you had. Demand vergild or kill you or someone in your family. If they choose revenge, your family must respond, and suddenly you're in a blood feud that can last for generations, killing after killing, revenge after revenge, with no end in sight. You're a farmer with no powerful connections. Your family is small. You have your wife, your children, your elderly father, and a few cousins. That's it. You're trying to farm your land and survive. But you're caught in a blood feud that started 2 generations ago over an insult you barely understand. Your grandfather's brother killed someone from another family. That family killed your grandfather. Your father killed someone from that family in revenge. Now they've killed your uncle. The feud continues, and you know that eventually someone will come to kill you or your children, simply because you're part of this family. There's no way out. You can't move away because your land is your only source of survival. You can't appeal to any authority because there is no authority. You just live with the constant knowledge that violence could arrive at any moment. The thing is supposed to be where disputes are resolved peacefully. The thing is a gathering of free men who meet to hear cases, make judgments, and create laws. In theory, this prevents blood feuds by providing an alternative to revenge. In practice, the thing only works if both parties agree to abide by its judgment, and enforcement depends entirely on social pressure and the threat of violence. If the thing rules against you but you're powerful enough, you can simply ignore the ruling. If you're weak, the ruling against you will be enforced brutally. You attend a thing because your neighbor has accused you of letting your cattle damage his crops. This is a serious accusation because crop damage could mean the difference between survival and starvation for his family. You argue that your cattle were properly fenced and that his crops were damaged by wild animals, not your livestock. He argues that he saw your cattle in his field. There are no neutral investigators. There's no forensic evidence. It's your word against his. The assembly of free men must decide who to believe. The assembly believes him. You're ordered to pay compensation in the form of grain and livestock. This compensation will significantly deplete your resources. You can barely afford it. But if you refuse to pay, you'll be declared an outlaw. Being an outlaw means anyone can kill you with no legal consequences. Your property can be taken. You have no legal protection whatsoever. So you pay, even though it means your family will go hungry this winter because the alternative is death. But your neighbor isn't satisfied with the compensation. He feels you haven't shown proper respect. He feels you argued too vigorously at the thing, making him look bad in front of the community. 2 weeks later, he comes to your farmstead with several of his relatives. They're armed. They say they want to discuss the matter further, but their intentions are clear. This is about violence, about putting you in your place, about demonstrating his superior status. You have no choice but to submit. If you fight back, you'll be outnumbered and killed. If you survive but kill any of them, the blood feud will escalate to a level your small family can't survive. So you stand there while your neighbor insults you, while he pushes you, while he strikes you in front of your family. He wants you to react. He wants an excuse to escalate, but you can't give him that excuse. You endure the humiliation because survival requires it. He leaves, but the humiliation burns. You've been publicly shamed. In Viking society, honor is everything. Your reputation, your social standing, your ability to make alliances and conduct business, all of it depends on how others perceive your honor. You've just been beaten in front of your family and you did nothing. Your neighbors will hear about this. They'll know you're weak. They'll know you can be pushed around. This will affect every future interaction you have. People will be less likely to respect your property boundaries. They'll be less likely to honor agreements with you. They'll be less likely to support you in disputes. You've lost status, and in Viking society, low status is dangerous. Your son, who is 15, is furious about what happened. He says you should have fought back. He says you've dishonored the family by submitting. He doesn't understand the calculation you made, the understanding that fighting would have gotten you both killed. He's young and full of ideas about honor and bravery. He decides to restore the family's honor himself. He goes to your neighbor's farmstead and challenges him to holmgang. Holmgang is a formalized duel. It's supposed to be a way to settle disputes through individual combat rather than blood feud. There are rules. The combat takes place on a marked area, usually a cloak or animal hide spread on the ground. Each fighter gets 3 shields. If you step off the marked area, you're considered a coward and you lose.
If you're wounded and your life fluid falls on the cloak, you can yield.
The loser must pay compensation to the winner. If someone dies, it's considered a legal killing, not murder. Your son doesn't understand that holmgang is for equals. Your neighbor is a grown man, experienced in combat, bigger and stronger. Your son is 15 with no real combat experience. But honor culture demands that your neighbor accept the challenge or be seen as a coward himself. So the holmgang is arranged. You watch your son die. The fight lasts less than 5 minutes. Your neighbor is toying with him at first, making it clear how outmatched your son is. Then he gets bored and ends it. He cuts your son down with 3 strikes. Your son falls onto the cloak. He's still alive, gasping, looking at you. He dies there on the ground while the witnesses stand around watching. This is legal. This is justice. Your neighbor is owed compensation now because your son challenged him and lost. You have to pay him for the trouble of killing your son. You have 2 remaining children, a daughter who is 12 and a son who is 8. Your daughter will be married off as soon as possible because you can't protect her. Your young son is all you have left to help with the farm work. Your wife is devastated. She's lost a child and she knows the other children are still in danger because the blood feud hasn't ended. It's just claimed another victim. The violence isn't always about feuds. Sometimes it's just casual, opportunistic. You're traveling to a neighboring settlement to trade for tools. The journey takes 2 days. On the road, you encounter a group of young men from a family you don't know. They're bored. They see you're traveling alone. They decide to rob you. They take your goods. They take your shoes. They beat you for entertainment. They leave you on the road injured. When you eventually make it home days later than expected, you can't do anything about it. You don't know who they were. Even if you did, you don't have the family support to seek revenge. You just lost everything you were going to trade and you have nothing to show for it except injuries. Your daughter, who is now 13, is married to a man from another family. This was supposed to create an alliance, to give your family some protection, but her new husband is aggressive. He strikes her regularly. She comes home one day with a broken arm and marks covering her face. You want to protect her, but legally she belongs to her husband now. He has the right to discipline his wife as he sees fit. If you intervene, you're interfering in another man's household, which could start a new dispute. Your daughter begs you to let her stay home. You want to say yes, but you can't. She has to go back. A week later, she's dead. Her husband says she fell. The marks on her body suggest otherwise, but there's no investigation. Her husband's family is larger and more powerful than yours. If you accuse him of wrongdoing, you'll start a blood feud you cannot win. So you bury your daughter and say nothing. Your youngest son is now 10. He's working full-time on the farm because there's no one else. He's too young for this labor. His body isn't developed enough. But you have no choice. One day while working, he's injured. A farming tool cuts deep into his leg. The wound becomes infected. You try to treat it with whatever remedies you know, but it's not enough. The infection spreads. Your son develops a fever. He's delirious, crying in pain. You watch him die slowly over a week. You've now lost 3 of your 4 children. Your wife stops speaking. She just stares at nothing, unable to process the losses. You're still working the farm because stopping means starvation, but everything feels pointless. The remaining daughter is 15 now. She's your last surviving child. A man from a neighboring family wants to marry her. He's older, in his 30s, known for being aggressive, but he's from a powerful family. This marriage might finally give you some protection. You ask your daughter what she wants. She says she doesn't want to marry him, but she understands it's not really her choice. The marriage is arranged. You hope this one will be different. It's not. Within a year, she's dead too. The official story is complications from childbirth. You don't believe it. But again, you can't do anything. Her husband's family is too powerful. You've now lost all 4 of your children to the harsh realities of Viking Age life. You're 50 years old. In Viking Age Scandinavia, this is very old. Most people don't live this long. Your body is damaged from decades of hard labor and multiple incidents. Your wife died 2 years ago. You think it was grief that killed her. Just gave up on living after losing all her children. You're alone on the farmstead that 4 generations of your family worked. There's no one to inherit it. When you die, which will be soon, the land will be claimed by stronger neighbors. Your family line ends with you. Violence permeates every social interaction. Even casual conversations carry the potential for deadly escalation. You're at a community gathering and someone makes a comment about your farm. It's not even particularly insulting. Just an observation that your fields don't look as productive as they used to. But in honor culture, any statement that could be interpreted as criticism is a challenge to your status. You have to respond, but you have to calibrate your response perfectly. Too weak and you look like you can be disrespected. Too strong and you might start a fight you can't win. You make a mild counterstatement trying to deflect. The other person pushes harder. Now there's an audience watching. Everyone is evaluating how you handle this. Your response here will affect your social standing for months. If you back down completely, people will remember. They'll test you more in future interactions. But if you escalate, you might end up in holmgang or worse. You navigate this conversational minefield, trying to maintain just enough dignity without triggering actual confrontation. It's exhausting. Every interaction requires this level of calculation. Children grow up immersed in this culture of honor and retaliation. Boys are trained from young ages to fight, to defend family honor, to never back down from challenges. This creates adults who are hypersensitive to perceived slights, who are quick to escalate to physical confrontation, who see compromise as weakness. Your grandson, before he died, got into a fight with another boy over something trivial. The fight escalated. Both boys had knives. Your grandson was stabbed. He was 11 years old. The other boy was 12. This wasn't considered unusual or shocking. This was boys being boys in Viking society. Women aren't exempt from this culture either. While they don't typically engage in direct physical combat, they're often the ones who goad men into action. A woman whose husband doesn't respond aggressively enough to an insult might publicly shame him, questioning his manhood, pushing him to prove himself through confrontation. Women are casualties of this culture too. Domestic situations turn deadly regularly. Men take out their frustrations on wives and daughters. There's no intervention, no protection, no escape. The constant state of potential violence creates profound psychological stress. You can never fully relax. You can never let your guard down. Every stranger is a potential threat. Every interaction is a potential conflict. You're always scanning for danger, always calculating risks, always ready to fight or flee. This hypervigilance is exhausting. It wears you down over years and decades. You see it in elderly people. They're jumpy, suspicious, unable to trust. Decades of living under threat of violence has rewired their nervous systems. Sleep is difficult because you're always listening for sounds that might indicate an attack. Blood feuds often involve nighttime raids. You might wake up to find armed men in your longhouse there to kill you in your sleep. You keep weapons near your bed. You sleep lightly. Any unusual sound brings you instantly alert, heart pounding, ready for violence. Your wife used to complain about how restless you were at night, how you would jolt awake at the smallest noise, but she understood why. Everyone understood why. This is normal in Viking Age Scandinavia. The legal concept of outlawry is particularly terrifying. If you're declared an outlaw, you become homo sacer, a sacred man, which paradoxically means you have no legal protection whatsoever. Anyone can kill you. Anyone can take your property. You can't seek help from courts or assemblies. You're effectively outside society. Some outlaws flee to the wilderness trying to survive alone. Most don't last long. The wilderness is harsh, and without community support, survival is nearly impossible. Some outlaws become raiders themselves. forming outlaw bands that attack isolated farms. This creates more violence, more feuds, more death. You once knew a man who was declared an outlaw for refusing to pay compensation in a dispute. He fled to the forest. For 2 years, people would occasionally see him, a wild figure living like an animal. Then one winter, they found his body. He died of exposure and starvation. No one buried him. His body was left for the wolves. This is what happens to outlaws. This is the ultimate sanction in a society with no prisons, no police, no centralized enforcement of law. The elderly are particularly vulnerable to violence because they can't defend themselves physically. When you become too old to work, too old to fight, you become a burden on your family. Some families care for their elderly well, others don't. You've heard stories of elderly people being abandoned during hard winters, left outside to die when food is scarce and mouths need to be fed. You've heard stories of elderly people being quietly killed by their own families, who can no longer afford to feed them. These stories aren't talked about openly, but everyone knows they happen. Accidents involving farm tools or animals are common, and sometimes these accidents aren't accidents. If someone wants you dead but doesn't want to start an open blood feud, a suspicious accident is convenient. You fall from a height, you're trampled by an animal, a tool slips and causes a fatal injury. There are witnesses who support the accident narrative. Maybe they're complicit. Maybe they're just people who don't want to get involved. Either way, you're dead and no one faces consequences. Raiding season brings additional dangers. When the raiders return from their expeditions, they're often drunk, violent, and looking for excitement. Even if you're not involved in raiding, you're affected by it. Raiders bring home captives who become part of the community. They bring home wealth that shifts local power dynamics. They bring home stories that glorify aggression and conquest. Young men hear these stories and want to prove themselves. More violence follows. The concept of justice through combat means that physical strength and fighting ability determine outcomes in disputes. This is fundamentally unjust for anyone who isn't a strong young man. If you're elderly, disabled, female, or just naturally not physically imposing, you're disadvantaged in every legal and social interaction. The system is designed to favor those who can commit effective violence. Everyone else must navigate around this reality, forming alliances, seeking protection from stronger parties, living cautiously to avoid provocations. Feuds can be inherited. Your great-grandfather killed someone. That person's great-grandson might decide to revive the feud and kill you, even though you had nothing to do with the original killing. The concept of collective family responsibility means that any member of a family can be targeted in revenge for something another family member did. This creates constant background anxiety. The sagas, the stories that are told and retold, glorify this aggression. They celebrate men who respond to insults with immediate physical force. They celebrate feuds that last generations. These stories shape culture, teaching each generation that force is not just acceptable but admirable. You're approaching the end of your life now. You're alone, your family destroyed. You did everything right according to the rules of this culture. You tried to maintain honor. You tried to protect your family, and still you lost everything. You're in 9th century Scandinavia and you're always hungry. Not the kind of hungry where you skip lunch and feel a bit peckish by dinner. This is profound, constant, bone-deep hunger that never fully goes away. Even in the best years, even after a good harvest, you never eat enough to feel truly satisfied. And in bad years, which come regularly and unpredictably, you're facing actual starvation. Your entire existence revolves around acquiring and preserving enough food to survive until the next growing season. And the terrifying reality is that one bad harvest, one harsh winter, one stroke of bad luck, and your family dies. This isn't a theoretical concern. This is the defining anxiety of your life. The growing season in Scandinavia is brutally short. You have maybe 4 months from late May to early September when crops can actually grow. The rest of the year, the ground is either frozen solid or too cold for anything to germinate. This means you have one chance per year to grow enough food to last 12 months. One chance. If something goes wrong during those 4 months, if there's too much rain, too little rain, an early frost, a late frost, a blight, insect infestation, anything at all, you don't get a second chance. You don't get to plant again next month. You wait an entire year, and during that year you starve. You're a farmer with a small plot of land. Let's talk about what you're actually growing and what that means for your nutrition. Your primary crop is barley. Barley grows relatively well in cold climates and can tolerate poor soil. You use barley to make porridge, bread, and ale. Barley is your survival crop. You also grow some oats, some peas, some cabbage, maybe some onions if you're lucky. That's basically it. You don't have potatoes because potatoes won't be introduced to Europe for another 700 years. You don't have corn for the same reason. You don't have rice, obviously. You don't have most of the vegetables that modern people consider basic. Your diet is monotonous to the point of being psychologically devastating. Barley porridge for breakfast. Barley bread for lunch. Barley porridge again for dinner. Day after day after day. Maybe you have some dried fish to add to the porridge if you were able to preserve fish from last summer. Maybe you have some dried peas. But fundamentally, you're eating the same thing every single day for months at a time. This monotony isn't just boring. It causes specific nutritional deficiencies that make you sick in predictable ways. You're deficient in vitamin C because you have almost no fresh fruits or vegetables during the 8-month winter. You develop scurvy. Your gums bleed when you eat. Your teeth become loose. Old wounds reopen. You bruise easily from the slightest bump. You're constantly tired and weak. You know that eating fresh greens would help. But there are no fresh greens available from October to May. You might have preserved some cabbage, but preserved cabbage loses most of its vitamin C content during storage. You're just sick, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're deficient in protein because meat is a luxury you rarely afford. You have a few chickens that provide eggs, but eggs are precious and usually saved for trade rather than consumption. You have a cow that provides milk, but during winter, milk production drops dramatically because the cow isn't getting enough nutrition either. You might slaughter a pig once a year, usually in autumn, and you'll preserve that meat by smoking or salting it. But one pig divided among your entire family? Rationed to last months means you're getting maybe a few ounces of meat per week. This isn't enough protein for a body doing heavy physical labor every day. Your muscles are constantly breaking down because your body is cannibalizing itself for protein. The caloric deficit is worse. You're burning maybe 3,000 calories per day doing farm labor in cold conditions. You're consuming maybe 1,500 calories per day because that's all the food available. Your body is in a constant state of starvation. You lose weight you can't afford to lose. Your body fat percentage drops to dangerously low levels. Women stop menstruating when body fat gets too low, which means they can't get pregnant, which means population growth is severely limited by nutrition. Men become infertile for the same reason. Your body is shutting down non-essential functions to conserve energy for basic survival. Children are hit hardest by malnutrition. Growing bodies need more calories and more nutrients than adult bodies. But in times of scarcity, children get the same reduced rations as adults, or even less because the working adults need to maintain strength to do the labor that keeps everyone alive. So children are chronically malnourished throughout their developmental years. This has permanent effects. They don't grow as tall as they genetically could. Their bones don't develop properly, leading to lifelong skeletal problems. Their brains don't develop fully, leading to cognitive impairments. Child mortality is high partly because malnourished children have weakened immune systems that can't fight off infections. Let's talk about what happens during a bad harvest year. It's spring and you're planting your barley. You've saved just enough seed grain from last year to plant this year's crop. This is a delicate calculation. You need to eat some of the grain to survive until the new harvest, but you also need to save enough to plant. If you eat too much, you won't have enough to plant, and next year will be even worse. If you save too much for planting, you might starve before the new crop comes in. Every family makes this calculation every year, and sometimes they get it wrong. You plant the barley in late May. The weather needs to cooperate. You need rain, but not too much rain. You need sun, but not too much sun. You need the temperature to stay moderate. You have no control over any of this. You just plant and pray to whatever gods you believe in and hope. This isn't a metaphor. You're literally praying for good weather because your life depends on it. June arrives and there's too much rain. The fields are waterlogged. The barley seeds are rotting in the ground before they can germinate. You watch your future food supply dying in the mud, and there's nothing you can do. You can't drain the fields. You can't make the rain stop. You just watch and feel the fear growing. By July, it's clear that this year's crop will fail. Maybe 30% of what you planted actually grew. maybe less. This isn't enough to last through the next winter and spring. You're going to starve. You immediately go into crisis mode. Every family in the region is in the same situation, so the entire community is scrambling. You try to trade for grain from regions that had better weather, but those regions know you're desperate, so prices are inflated to levels you can't afford. You try to forage for wild foods, berries, nuts, roots, anything edible, but everyone else is doing the same thing, so the forests are quickly stripped of anything remotely edible. You try to fish more intensively, but fish stocks are limited, and overfishing means less for next year. By autumn, you're making terrible choices about what to slaughter. The rational choice is to slaughter the animals you can't feed through winter anyway. If you don't have enough grain to feed yourself, you certainly don't have enough to feed livestock. So you slaughter the cow, you slaughter the chickens, you preserve as much meat as you can. This gives you food for the immediate winter. But next spring you won't have a cow for milk or for plowing. You won't have chickens for eggs. You've sacrificed next year's food security to survive this year. It's a downward spiral that's almost impossible to escape. Winter arrives and you're rationing everything. The family is eating one meal per day. That meal is watery porridge with maybe a small piece of dried fish. Children are crying from hunger. Your wife is listless and weak. Your elderly father is deteriorating rapidly. He's not getting enough food to maintain his body weight. You can see his ribs through his skin. You know he's going to die and there's nothing you can do. In fact, part of you is grimly calculating that when he dies there will be one less mouth to feed, and maybe the rest of the family can survive. Your father dies in January. You find him one morning cold and still. He probably died during the night. You tell yourself it was the cold, but you know it was starvation. His body just gave out. You bury him in the frozen ground, which requires hours of brutal labor to dig even a shallow grave. No ceremony. No time for grief. You have to keep working to keep the others alive. February is the worst month. Your food supplies are nearly exhausted. You're eating bark. Yes, actual tree bark. You strip bark from birch trees, boil it to make it slightly more digestible, and eat it. It has almost no nutritional value, but it fills your stomach and provides some fiber. You're also eating leather. Old shoes, old belts, anything made of leather. You boil it until it softens and you chew it. Again, minimal nutrition, but it's something to chew, something to trick your body into thinking it's being fed. Your youngest child dies in February. She's 5 years old. She's been sick for weeks, but you couldn't do anything because sick children need more food and there is no more food. She just got weaker and weaker until she stopped breathing. Your wife doesn't react. She's too depleted herself to process the grief. You bury your daughter next to your father. 2 graves in 6 weeks. 2 members of the family gone. And winter isn't over yet. March arrives and you're hallucinating from hunger. Your brain isn't getting enough glucose. You're seeing things that aren't there. You're hearing voices. Your thoughts are confused and slow. You can't remember simple things. This is what severe starvation does to cognition. Your brain is literally shutting down non-essential functions. Memory, reason, emotional regulation. All of these are luxury functions when your body is in survival mode. You're also suffering from edema, which is swelling caused by protein deficiency. Your legs and feet are swollen. Your belly is distended even though you're skeletal everywhere else. This is a sign that your body is failing. Your organs are beginning to shut down. You're dying slowly and you know it. But April is coming. If you can just survive until April, maybe you can forage for early spring greens. Maybe some fish will return to the streams. Maybe you can survive. April comes and you do find some early shoots and plants. They're bitter and tough, but they're fresh food. And fresh food has vitamins your body desperately needs. You eat dandelion greens. You eat young nettle leaves. You eat anything that's even potentially edible. Your body begins to recover just slightly. The hallucinations stop. The edema starts to reduce. But you're permanently damaged. Your body has catabolized muscle tissue for energy. You'll never fully recover the strength you had before this winter. May arrives and it's planting season again. But you have a problem. You don't have seed grain. You ate all of it trying to survive the winter. You go to your neighbors to borrow seed grain, promising to pay it back with interest after the harvest. But your neighbors are in the same situation. Nobody has extra grain to lend. You go to the local chieftain, a wealthy man who might have stored extra grain. He does have grain, but his terms are exploitative. He'll lend you seed grain, but you'll owe him half of your next harvest. This is usury and it means you'll be in debt bondage. But you have no choice. Without seed grain, you can't plant. Without planting, you'll definitely starve next winter. So you take the deal. You plant the borrowed grain. This year the weather is better. The crop grows. August comes and you harvest. It's a decent harvest, nothing spectacular, but decent. You're relieved. But then you have to give half of it to the chieftain as repayment. What you have left is barely enough to survive the coming winter. And you have nothing extra to save for emergencies. You're one bad season away from the same crisis all over again. This is the cycle. You're never secure. You're never comfortable. You're always one failed harvest away from starvation. And this isn't because you're lazy or incompetent. This is structural. The climate is marginal for agriculture. The growing season is too short. The soil is poor. The preservation techniques are limited. The transportation infrastructure doesn't exist to import food from distant regions. You're trapped in a system where starvation is always looming just a few months away. Some years entire regions experience famine. When this happens, the social order breaks down. Desperate people do desperate things. You hear stories of people eating their own children during the worst famines. You want to think these stories are exaggerated. But you've been desperate enough that you understand how it could happen. When you're watching your children die slowly of starvation, when you've already lost some and others are dying, the human mind can rationalize anything. You haven't done it. But you understand how someone could. The psychological trauma of living on the edge of starvation is profound. You can never relax. You can never feel secure. Every meal might be the last meal for a while. Every harvest might fail. Every winter might be the winter that kills you. This constant anxiety wears you down over years. You see it in people's faces, the permanent tension, the haunted look of someone who has watched family members starve to death and knows it could happen again at any time. The wealthy live differently. The chieftain who lent you seed grain isn't worried about starvation. He has stores of grain that could last his household for years. He has salted meat. He has preserved fish. He has ale and mead. His children are well fed and healthy. His wife isn't emaciated. This creates resentment, obviously. But you can't act on that resentment because he's powerful and you're not. You just watch your children go hungry while his children thrive, and you swallow your anger because expressing it would be dangerous. Food preservation is limited by available technology. You can salt meat and fish, but salt is expensive. You can smoke meat and fish, but smoking doesn't preserve food as long as you need it to last. You can dry certain foods in the sun, but Scandinavia doesn't have reliable sun during the growing season. You can store grain in sealed containers, but rodents and insects still get in and destroy significant portions. You might lose 20% of your stored grain to pests. That 20% could be the difference between survival and death. Fishing is supposed to supplement your diet, but fishing in Scandinavia is dangerous and unreliable. The waters are cold and rough. Small boats capsize regularly. Men drown. Even when fishing is successful, you're catching species that are nutritious but need to be preserved immediately. You spend hours cleaning fish, salting fish, smoking fish, and you still lose much of the catch to spoilage. And fishing takes time away from farming, so you're constantly making difficult choices about how to allocate labor. Hunting is even more unreliable. The forests have been hunted heavily for generations. Large game is scarce. Deer, elk, boar, these animals exist, but they're hard to find and hard to kill. You don't have guns. You have spears or bows and arrows. Hunting requires skill and luck and time. Most hunting expeditions come back empty-handed. And when you do kill an animal, you're competing with predators. Wolves and bears will try to steal your kill. Sometimes they succeed. Small game like rabbits and birds supplement your diet slightly. But they're also being hunted by everyone, so populations are depleted. You set snares and traps, but most days you catch nothing. When you do catch a rabbit, it provides maybe one meal for your family. One meal. Then you're back to hunger. Wild plants and berries are important during late summer and early autumn. You forage for blueberries, lingonberries, cloudberries. You gather nuts where you can find them. You dig up roots. But this food is seasonal and can't be preserved well. You eat it fresh during the harvest season, enjoying a brief period of slightly better nutrition, and then it's gone. You try to preserve berries by drying them, but dried berries have much less nutritional value than fresh berries, and they don't keep well in the damp Scandinavian climate. They often mold before you can eat them. The concept of food security simply doesn't exist. You cannot achieve food security in this environment with this technology. You can have a good year where you feel slightly less hungry, but you can never be secure. Even the wealthy aren't truly secure because several bad years in a row can deplete even large stores. The king himself could face food shortages if conditions are bad enough. Trade could theoretically help. If one region has surplus, they could trade with regions that have deficit. But transportation is the limiting factor. Moving large quantities of grain over long distances in 9th century Scandinavia is nearly impossible. There are no roads. There are no carts that can handle rough terrain. You'd have to transport grain by boat, which is slow, dangerous, and expensive. By the time grain arrives from a distant region, it might be moldy or infested with pests, and the people with surplus have no incentive to trade it away when they know they might need it next year. The social hierarchy is enforced partly through food distribution. The chieftain and his warriors eat first and eat well. They get the best cuts of meat. They get the fresh bread. They get adequate portions. Then come the freemen who get less but still something. Then come the dependents, the elderly, the children who get whatever remains. And at the bottom are those in servitude who get the scraps. This isn't accidental. This is how power maintains itself. Those at the top stay strong and healthy. Those at the bottom stay weak and compliant. You're in the middle of this hierarchy as a freeman, but you're barely surviving. You see the chieftain's household thriving while your family struggles. You see warriors, who produce no food themselves, eating better than farmers who do all the actual productive labor. This feels unjust, but justice isn't a concept that applies to food distribution. Power determines who eats. Women bear additional burdens related to food. They're responsible for food preparation, preservation, cooking, and managing household supplies. They're the ones stretching inadequate supplies to feed the family. They're the ones skipping meals so children can eat. And when women are pregnant or nursing, they need extra calories. They don't get them. Pregnant women are malnourished, which leads to complications and high maternal mortality. Breastfeeding women are producing milk from bodies that don't have adequate nutrition. The milk is lower quality. Babies fed on this milk don't thrive. Many babies die simply because their mothers couldn't produce adequate milk. The elderly are casualties of food scarcity. When food is limited, elderly people who can't work get smaller portions. Many die not from illness but from chronic malnutrition. You're now in your 40s and your body shows decades of inadequate nutrition. Your teeth are mostly gone. Your bones are brittle. You look decades older than your actual age. Your remaining son is stunted from malnutrition. Generation after generation lives on the edge of starvation.
You're in 9th century Scandinavia, and your body is failing. You're 35 years old, which makes you middle-aged by Viking standards, though you feel ancient. Every joint aches. Every movement requires conscious effort. You wake up in pain. You work through pain. You go to sleep in pain. This isn't temporary. This isn't an injury that will heal. This is permanent physical deterioration caused by decades of brutal labor, inadequate nutrition, repeated injuries, and complete absence of medical care. Your body is breaking down, and you know you probably won't live to see 45. Most people don't. Let's start with your spine. You've been doing heavy manual labor since you were 7 years old, lifting, carrying, bending, twisting, all day, every day for nearly 30 years. Your spine was never designed for this. The vertebrae are compressed. The discs between vertebrae are deteriorated. You have what modern medicine would call severe degenerative disc disease and osteoarthritis of the spine. You don't know these terms. You just know that your back hurts constantly, that certain movements cause shooting pain down your legs, that you can't stand up straight anymore, that your posture is permanently bent forward. The pain in your lower back is especially bad. It radiates down your right leg, making that leg weak and partially numb. This is nerve compression from damaged discs pressing on spinal nerves. You can't walk properly anymore. You limp. You move slowly and carefully because sudden movements cause agonizing pain. You can't do the heavy farm work you used to do. This is a serious problem because you're a farmer and farm work is how you survive, but your body simply can't do it anymore. Your knees are destroyed. Decades of squatting, kneeling, climbing, carrying heavy loads, all without any kind of joint protection or support. Your knee cartilage is worn away. Bone is grinding on bone. The pain is constant and severe. Your knees swell regularly. They're hot to the touch, inflamed, barely functional. You can't kneel anymore. You can't squat. Getting up from a sitting position requires using your arms to push yourself up because your knees can't bear the load. Stairs are nearly impossible. You avoid them when you can, but farm life doesn't allow much avoidance. Your hands are gnarled and deformed. Your fingers don't straighten completely. They're locked in a partially curled position from decades of gripping tools. You have severe arthritis in every finger joint. The joints are swollen, the fingers crooked. Some fingers are partially fused in place. You can still grip things, but not well. You drop things frequently. Fine motor control is gone. You can't do delicate work anymore. Even simple tasks like tying knots or threading a needle are difficult or impossible. Your shoulders are damaged from years of carrying heavy loads. You carried water buckets on a yoke across your shoulders for decades. You carried firewood, grain sacks, animal feed, all distributed across your shoulders and upper back. The shoulder joints are worn out. The rotator cuffs are torn. You can't lift your arms above your head anymore. You can't throw anything with force. Your range of motion is severely limited. This makes many tasks impossible. You can't reach things on high shelves. You can't do overhead work. Your functional capacity is dramatically reduced. Your teeth are mostly gone. The few that remain are broken stumps that cause constant pain. You lost some teeth to decay. You lost others to abscesses that went untreated. You lost others in fights or accidents. Eating is difficult and painful. You can only eat soft foods. Hard foods are impossible to chew. This limits your already limited diet even further. You're not getting adequate nutrition partly because you physically can't eat many types of food that would provide better nutrition. The tooth abscesses you've had over the years have caused chronic sinus infections. You have constant sinus pain and pressure. Your sense of smell is diminished. You get frequent headaches. Sometimes the infection spreads and causes fever and general illness. You've survived several serious infections that could easily have killed you. Each one left you weaker. Your hearing is deteriorating. Years of exposure to loud noises without any hearing protection have damaged your inner ear structures. You have tinnitus, a constant ringing in your ears that never stops. You have difficulty hearing normal conversation, especially in noisy environments. People get frustrated with you because they have to repeat themselves. You're becoming socially isolated, partly because you can't hear well enough to participate in conversations. Your vision is failing. You're developing cataracts, clouding of the eye lens that makes everything appear foggy and dim. Colors are muted. Details are hard to see. Reading, if you could read, would be impossible. Fine detailed work is increasingly difficult. You trip over things you didn't see. You misjudge distances. This makes you more prone to accidents, and accidents at your age with your deteriorated physical condition can be fatal. You have chronic respiratory problems from decades of breathing smoke and working in cold, damp conditions. You cough constantly. The cough is productive, bringing up phlegm that's sometimes bloody. Your lungs are damaged. Your breathing capacity is reduced. Physical exertion leaves you gasping for breath. Climbing hills that you used to run up now require frequent rest stops. You're getting less oxygen to your tissues, which contributes to your overall weakness and fatigue. Your heart is probably damaged too, though you have no way to know it. Years of physical stress, poor nutrition, and repeated infections have taken their toll on your cardiovascular system. You get chest pain sometimes. Your heart beats irregularly. You feel dizzy when you stand up too quickly. These are signs of cardiovascular disease. But in 9th century Scandinavia, They're just accepted as normal parts of aging. Your digestive system is a mess. You have chronic stomach pain. You have frequent diarrhea, alternating with constipation. You have intestinal parasites that you've had for years and will have for the rest of your life. These parasites cause malnutrition, anemia, and general weakness. You have what's probably inflammatory bowel disease from years of poor diet and chronic low-grade infections. Every meal is followed by discomfort or pain. Your liver is probably damaged from years of drinking ale and mead that was often contaminated with mold and bacteria. Your kidneys are probably damaged from chronic dehydration and repeated infections. Your body's major organs are failing, slowly but steadily. You feel constantly fatigued. You have no energy. Getting through each day requires enormous effort. Your immune system is compromised from decades of malnutrition and chronic stress. You get sick easily. Simple infections that a healthy person would fight off easily can lay you out for weeks. You recover slowly from illnesses. Each illness takes more out of you than the last. You're in a downward spiral where being sick makes you weaker, and being weaker makes you more susceptible to getting sick. You have multiple scars from injuries over the years, a badly healed broken arm that leaves that arm weaker and shorter than the other, a deep cut on your leg from a farming accident that healed poorly and left a large scar tissue area that's always painful, burns from falling into the fire pit one winter night. Each scar represents a time you almost died but survived. But survival came with permanent consequences. You have chronic pain that never goes away. Modern medicine would call this chronic pain syndrome. Your nervous system has been sensitized by years of repeated injuries and ongoing damage. You feel pain more intensely than you used to. You feel pain in areas that aren't even injured because your pain processing systems are overloaded. There's no treatment for this, no pain medication. You just live with it. The psychological impact of living in a body that's falling apart is severe. You're depressed. You have no hope for improvement. You know you're only going to get worse. You know you're approaching the end of your productive years. And in Viking society, when you can't work, your value to the community plummets. You're worried about becoming a burden. You're worried about starving because you can't work. You're worried about being abandoned or killed when you become too weak to contribute. Your sleep is terrible. The pain keeps you awake. When you do sleep, you don't sleep deeply because your body can't get comfortable. You wake up frequently. You never feel rested. The chronic sleep deprivation makes everything worse. Your pain is worse. Your mood is worse. Your cognitive function is worse. You're in a cycle where pain prevents sleep and lack of sleep increases pain. Your sexual function is gone. This might seem trivial compared to your other problems, but it's another marker of physical decline. Years of malnutrition, chronic stress, and general poor health have destroyed your hormonal system. This affects not just sexual function but overall vitality, muscle mass, bone density, and mood. You're experiencing what modern medicine would call premature aging. You're 35 but your body is functioning like someone's 70. You look at younger people and remember when you had that energy, that strength, that resilience. It seems impossible that you were ever like that. The change happened gradually, year by year, injury by injury, illness by illness. There was no single moment when you became old. It was a slow accumulation of damage that eventually reached critical mass. Now you're broken, and there's no fixing it. You see elderly people in the community, and understand that most of them won't live much longer. They're in their 50s or 60s, ancient by Viking standards. They're barely mobile. They're clearly suffering. They're completely dependent on family members for care. You're heading toward that same fate in just a few years. If you're lucky enough to live that long, many people your age are already dead. The leading causes of death for middle-aged people in Viking society are infections, injuries that become infected, complications from chronic diseases, and simply giving up. People reach a point where the pain and suffering aren't worth enduring anymore, where they stop eating, stop trying, stop fighting, It's not suicide in the modern sense. It's just accepting death as a relief from misery. You've thought about death frequently. You're not afraid of death itself. You're afraid of the process of dying, which you know will probably be slow and painful. You're afraid of leaving your family vulnerable. You're afraid that your life will have meant nothing, that you'll be forgotten within a generation. These aren't unusual thoughts. Everyone in this society thinks about death constantly because death is always close. Your remaining family members are worried about you. They see your physical decline. They know what it means. They're already thinking about life after you're gone. This isn't cold or cruel. This is practical reality. In a society where survival requires constant planning and adaptation, when you die, your widow will need to remarry quickly or find protection from another family. Your children will need to figure out how to work the land without you. Life will go on without you. You think about what you might have accomplished in a different time, a different place, with access to medical care, adequate nutrition, safer working conditions. But those thoughts are pointless. You were born in 9th century Scandinavia. You lived the only life available to you. You did the best you could with what you had, and now your body is broken at 35, and you'll probably be dead before 40. The specific medical conditions you have would all be treatable or preventable in modern times. Your back pain could be managed with physical therapy, anti-inflammatory medications, possibly surgery. Your arthritis could be treated with medications that reduce inflammation and slow joint destruction. Your infections could be cured with antibiotics. Your nutritional deficiencies could be corrected with proper diet and supplements. Your vision could be restored with cataract surgery. Your dental problems could be prevented with basic oral hygiene and treated with modern dentistry. But none of that exists in your world. You have medieval problems with no medieval solutions. The younger generation looks at you and sees their own future. They're already developing the same problems you have. The 15-year-olds have joint pain from years of heavy labor. The 20-year-olds are losing teeth. The 25-year-olds have chronic injuries that aren't healing properly. Everyone is on the same trajectory toward physical breakdown. Some people get there faster. Some people last a bit longer, but everyone ends up in the same place eventually. There's a social stigma around being unable to work. In a society where everyone must contribute to survive, someone who can't work is a burden. You feel this stigma acutely. You try to hide your limitations. You push yourself beyond what your body can handle, because you don't want to be seen as useless. This makes your conditions worse. You're trapped between the physical reality of your failing body and the social pressure to remain productive. Women often decline even faster than men, because they have the added burden of repeated pregnancies and childbirths on top of all the other physical stresses. A woman who has had 6 or 7 pregnancies by age 35 is often completely broken down. Torn pelvic floor muscles that never healed properly, permanent damage from difficult deliveries, chronic pain from injuries that occurred during childbirth. Many women are incontinent from pelvic damage. Many have prolapsed uteruses. These conditions are shameful and isolating. Women suffer in silence because there's nothing to be done, and talking about it is considered inappropriate. The concept of retirement doesn't exist. You work until you physically can't work anymore, and then you become dependent on family or community charity. Being dependent is humiliating. You've spent your entire life working hard, contributing, being self-sufficient. Now you're weak and needy, and you hate it. Some people in this situation become bitter and angry. Others become withdrawn and depressed. You're somewhere in between, alternating between frustration and resignation. Your grandchildren, if you have any surviving grandchildren, are growing up watching you deteriorate. They're learning that this is normal, that this is what happens to people. They're learning that life is hard, bodies break, and pain is inevitable. These lessons shape them into adults who accept suffering as normal, who don't expect better, who don't imagine that life could be different. This is how cultures perpetuate themselves. Each generation teaches the next to accept the conditions they themselves accepted. You've seen people die from the same conditions you have. A neighbor died last year from what was probably kidney failure.
Another man died from what was probably a stroke. A woman died from what was probably sepsis from a tooth abscess. These deaths could have been prevented with modern medical knowledge, but that knowledge doesn't exist here. People die from things that wouldn't kill them in later centuries, and their deaths are just accepted as the natural order. The few people who do live to 60 or 70 are considered miracle. They're often respected as elders, repositories of knowledge and wisdom, but they're also often miserable. Their bodies are completely broken, they're in constant pain, they're blind or nearly blind, they're deaf or nearly deaf, they can barely move, they require constant care, they're essentially waiting to die. Some of them wish death would come sooner, but suicide is shameful in this culture, so they just endure. Your mental capacity is declining along with your physical capacity. You forget things more easily. You have trouble concentrating. You make mistakes that you wouldn't have made when younger. This is partly normal aging, but accelerated by chronic malnutrition, poor circulation to the brain, repeated head injuries over the years, and chronic pain that makes it hard to think clearly. You're aware of your declining mental abilities, which is frightening. You worry about becoming senile, becoming unable to care for yourself, becoming a burden. The isolation of physical decline is profound. As you become less mobile, you participate less in community activities. You spend more time alone at home. Your social circle shrinks. The friendships you had fade because you can't keep up with activities. You become increasingly lonely. Loneliness makes depression worse. Depression makes physical symptoms worse. Everything feeds into everything else in a downward spiral. There are folk remedies that people try. Certain herbs are supposed to help with pain. Certain rituals are supposed to promote healing. Certain amulets are supposed to protect against illness. None of them work in any meaningful way, but people try them anyway, because the alternative is accepting that nothing can be done. Hope is necessary for survival even when that hope is unrealistic. You reflect on your life and realize that you spent most of it in pain, in hunger, in fear, in hard labor. The brief moments of joy or satisfaction were rare and fleeting. Most days were just grinding through necessary tasks to survive another day. This is depressing to contemplate. You want to believe your life had meaning, had purpose, but the honest assessment is that you were born, you struggled, and you'll die, and the world will barely notice. Your family will mourn briefly, and then get on with their own struggle for survival. The physical reality of Viking Age existence means that human bodies break down prematurely. Average life expectancy is somewhere around 35 to 40 years, not because people are genetically programmed to die young, but because the cumulative damage from hard labor, poor nutrition, inadequate medical care, and repeated injuries kills people before they reach what should be middle age. In a modern context with modern conditions, most of these people could live to 70 or 80, but in 9th century Scandinavia, they're dead at 40. You're approaching that age now. You're 35 and you can feel death approaching. Your body is sending clear signals that it's failing. You're getting weaker. You're in more pain. You're developing new symptoms. You know you don't have many years left. Maybe 5 if you're lucky. Maybe less if you're not. You try to make peace with this reality. You try to prepare your family for life without you. You try to accomplish whatever final tasks you can still manage. And you wait for the end, hoping it comes quickly when it comes, hoping you don't linger in agony for months or years. This is life in Viking Age Scandinavia. Your body breaks before 40, and then you die.